I stood in the shadows of Christie's auction house, watching my parents walk through the grand entrance. They hadn't changed much in 15 years. My father still carried himself with that air of absolute certainty. My mother still dressed to impress in designer labels that screamed old money. They had no idea I was here, no idea that the paintings they'd come to bid on were mine. I'm Isabella Mitchell, though the art world knows me only as I am, the mysterious artist whose abstract works now sell for millions. But 15 years ago, I was just their disappointing daughter who refused to get a real job. The memory of that day still burns clear in my mind. I'd come home from art school to find my paintings, 2 years of work, piled in the garbage. My father stood in my studio, now emptied of everything except my easel. "This ends now," he'd said, his voice cold with finality. "No more wasting time on worthless scribblings. You're going to law school, like we planned." My mother had stood behind him, nodding in agreement. "Darling, this little hobby of yours, it's not a career. The Mitchells are lawyers, not struggling artists." I can still feel the paint on my fingers as I dug through the garbage, salvaging what I could. One canvas survived, my favorite piece, an abstract study in blues and golds that my father had called meaningless splashes. That painting now hung in the Museum of Modern Art, valued at over $3 million. "Ms. Mitchell." My assistant David's voice pulled me back to the present. "They're about to start the preview. Your parents are heading toward Gallery 3. I nodded, adjusting my dark wig and sunglasses. After 15 years of careful anonymity, only a handful of people knew that I was Isabella Mitchell. My parents certainly didn't. They thought I was working as an art consultant in Chicago, making a modest living managing other people's collections. The truth was far different. That last canvas I'd saved became my signature style, launching a career that would revolutionize modern abstract art. But I never revealed my identity, never showed my face at galleries or openings. The mystery only added to my allure and to my prices. I followed my parents into Gallery 3, keeping my distance as they approached my latest series. 5 large canvases, each an exploration of light and shadow, chaos and order. The auction estimate started at $5 million per piece. "Extraordinary," my mother breathed, staring at the centerpiece. "The way the light seems to move through the darkness." My father consulted his auction catalog. "Im's Redemption Series. Starting bid $5 million each." He shook his head. "The art world has gone mad. Who pays this much for random paint splashes?" I smiled, remembering similar words from years ago. The difference was, now he wanted to own one of those random paint splashes. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell." A Christie's representative approached them. "I understand you're interested in bidding on the Anne collection?" My mother nodded eagerly. "Yes. We're redecorating our home in the Hamptons. An Im original would be perfect for the main salon. Everyone who's anyone has one now." I had to suppress a laugh. The irony was almost too perfect, my parents wanting my art not for its beauty or meaning, but because it had become a status symbol. "I must warn you," the representative said carefully, "there's already significant interest in these pieces. We expect them to go well above estimate." My father waved his hand dismissively. "Money is no object. The Mitchells always get what they want." Not this time, I thought, watching them move on to the next gallery. These paintings weren't for sale, not to them. I'd made sure of that. David appeared at my elbow. "Your parents seem quite taken with the collection." "They're taken with the prestige," I corrected him. "Just like they were taken with the idea of having a lawyer for a daughter." I turned to him. "Is everything set for tomorrow?" He nodded. "All the arrangements are made. When the truth comes out." "When the truth comes out," I interrupted softly. 15 years of rejection will finally make sense. I walked closer to my paintings, remembering the long journey that brought me here. After my parents destroyed my work, I left home with nothing but that once salvaged canvas and a small inheritance from my grandmother. My parents had tried to control that too, but Grandma had been clever. The money came with no strings attached. I changed my name, moved to a tiny studio in Brooklyn, and started over. During the day, I worked as a gallery assistant, learning the business side of art. At night, I painted, developing my style, refining my vision. The first sale came unexpectedly. A small gallery owner saw something special in my work. Then another sale, and another. When my first piece sold for 6 figures, I made a decision. I would never let my parents' rejection define me. But I would also never give them the satisfaction of claiming my success. I became M, the artist without a face, letting my work speak for itself. The art world loves a mystery, and they loved M. Critics praised my fearless exploration of light and shadow. Collectors fought over my pieces. Museums began acquiring my work for their permanent collections. And through it all, I remained anonymous, watching from the shadows as my reputation grew. My parents, meanwhile, had to content themselves with updates about their sensible daughter's modest career in art consulting. Every Christmas, every reluctant family gathering, they'd remind me how I dodged a bullet by giving up my artistic dreams. "At least you're working in the art world," my mother would say, her voice dripping with condescension, "even if it's just managing other people's collections." If they only knew that their daughter's paintings now hung in the homes of billionaires and royalty, that the piece they called garbage was now studied in art schools as a masterwork of modern abstraction. A commotion near the entrance drew my attention. Several major collectors had arrived, including the director of the Guggenheim. They were all here for tomorrow's auction, an auction that would shock the art world and shatter my parents' carefully constructed reality. "Your father's making notes on the bidding estimates," David murmured. "Looks like they're serious about buying." I watched my father checking figures on his phone, probably calculating how much of his law firm's profits he could spend on an original. "Let them think they have a chance," I said quietly. "Tomorrow will be interesting enough." As I left Christie's that evening, I passed my mother in the lobby. She was talking excitedly on her phone about being this close to owning an IM. She looked right through me, not recognizing her daughter behind the disguise. In my car, a subtle but expensive Mercedes, I called my gallery owner Marcus. "Are they suspicious?" "Not at all," he chuckled. "Your parents spent an hour talking about how they simply must have an IM for their collection. Your mother mentioned something about it being an investment in culture. If they only knew." I thought about the real investment I'd made, not in money, but in myself. When everyone else saw garbage, I'd seen possibility. When they demanded I conform, I'd chosen to transform. "Tomorrow then," I said, ending the call. At home, a penthouse overlooking Central Park, I changed out of my disguise and stood before my latest work in progress. It was different from my usual style, more personal somehow. Perhaps because I knew it would be the piece that finally revealed the truth. I picked up my brush, adding touches of gold to the swirling darkness. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, my parents would learn that the daughter they rejected had become the artist they couldn't afford. But tonight, I painted, just as I had every night for 15 years. Because in the end, this was never about them. It was about staying true to my vision, even when the whole world called it worthless. I worked late into the night, losing myself in the canvas, in the pure joy of creation that my parents had never understood. Outside my window, New York glittered like a painting itself, full of light and shadow, chaos and order. Tomorrow would bring its own kind of chaos. But for now, I painted, letting the colors tell the story I kept silent for so long. The morning of the auction, Christie's was buzzing with anticipation. Art collectors, museum directors, and critics filled the grand hall, all eager to bid on the mysterious Im's latest works. My parents sat in the front row, my father clutching his bidding paddle like a weapon. I watched from backstage, still in my disguise. In 30 minutes, 15 years of secrecy would end. Marcus, my gallery owner, approached with a concerned look. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Once we make the announcement, there's no going back." I touched the small canvas I brought with me, the one my father had thrown away all those years ago. "I'm sure. It's time." The auction began with smaller pieces, but everyone was waiting for the AM collection. Finally, the auctioneer cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed with the M Redemption series, we have a special announcement. For the first time in 15 years, the artist known as M has agreed to reveal their identity." A murmur ran through the crowd. My father leaned forward, probably already calculating how this revelation might affect his investment. Marcus stepped up to the podium. "As Im's exclusive gallery representative, it's my honor to share this moment. But first, a piece of history." He gestured, and assistants brought out my salvaged canvas, the one piece that had survived my parents' purge. This work, now valued at over $3 million and hanging in May, was nearly lost forever. 15 years ago, it was thrown in the garbage by parents who called it worthless, who demanded their daughter give up art for a real career. My mother's face went pale. My father's hand tightened on his paddle. That daughter left home with nothing but this canvas and a determination to prove them wrong. She changed her name, developed her style in secret, and became the artist we know as Im. I stepped onto the stage, removing my wig and sunglasses. "Hello, mother. Father. Surprised to see your garbage selling for millions?" The silence was absolute. My father stood up, his face contorted with shock. "Isabella?" "Actually," I said, approaching the podium, "it's I am, though I suppose you never made the connection between your disappointing daughter and the artist whose work you're so eager to buy." My mother's carefully maintained composure cracked. But you're an art consultant in Chicago." "No, that was just a cover. I'm the artist you've been reading about, the one whose random paint splashes you suddenly find so valuable." I gestured to the Redemption series. "These pieces you wanted to buy. They're about transformation, about finding beauty in rejection." Rather fitting, don't you think? The audience was captivated. Several people were filming on their phones, capturing the moment the art world's biggest mystery was revealed in such dramatic fashion. "This isn't possible," my father sputtered. "You can't be M, we would have known." "Would you?" I challenged. "You never looked at my work, never tried to understand what I was creating. You were too busy telling me what I couldn't do to see what I was actually doing." Marcus stepped forward with a folder. "Perhaps you'd be interested in seeing these, Mr. Mitchell. Sales records for M's work over the past decade. Museum acquisitions. Critical reviews. Your daughter isn't just successful, she's revolutionized modern abstract art." My father took the folder with trembling hands. $5 million. Per painting? "Actually," I corrected him, "these pieces aren't for sale, not to you. They're being donated to the Metropolitan Museum of Art along with the story of their creation. A reminder that art's true value can't be measured by someone else's expectations." My mother stood up, tears streaming down her face. "Darling, if we'd known." "That's exactly the point," I cut her off. "You never tried to know. You were so convinced you knew what was best for me that you couldn't see what I was becoming." The auctioneer tried to restore order as whispers and camera flashes filled the room. Art critics were already typing on their phones, no doubt crafting headlines about the dramatic revelation of M's identity. "The auction will proceed," I announced, "but with one change. All proceeds will establish a foundation for young artists whose families don't support their dreams. Because talent shouldn't be thrown away just because someone else can't see its worth." The applause was thunderous. In the front row, my parents sat in stunned silence, watching as their chance to own an Im original slipped away, along with their illusion of control over their daughter's life. Afterward, in the private viewing room, they tried to approach me. My father spoke first, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Isabella, I don't know what to say." "There's nothing to say," I replied calmly. "You made your choices 15 years ago. I made mine." "We were wrong," my mother whispered. "So terribly wrong. Can you ever forgive us?" I looked at them, really looked at them, for the first time in years. They seemed smaller somehow, their certainty shattered, their worldview upended. "Forgiveness isn't the point," I said finally. "I didn't reveal myself to get an apology. I did it because I'm done hiding my success to spare your pride." "But you're our daughter," my father protested. "Surely we can." "Can what?" I interrupted. "Claim credit for my success. Pretend you supported me all along." "No, I built this career despite you, not because of you." I gestured to my paintings, my Redemption series. Each of these pieces tells a story of transformation, of finding strength in rejection. They're worth millions now, but their real value isn't in money. It's in what they represent, the triumph of believing in yourself when no one else does. Over the next few weeks, the art world buzzed with my revelation. Critics wrote lengthy pieces analyzing my work through the lens of my story. Galleries reported increased interest in supporting emerging artists. My foundation received thousands of applications from young creators facing similar rejection. My parents tried to reconnect, sending expensive gifts, making grand gestures. But they still didn't understand. This wasn't about money or success, it was about validation. About proving that art's worth couldn't be measured by someone else's standards. One evening, as I worked in my studio on a new piece, I received a message. A young artist, inspired by my story, had defied her parents' demands to give up painting. She was hosting her first gallery show. I attended anonymously, watching her explain her work to visitors with passionate intensity. Her parents weren't there, they'd refused to come. But she stood tall, believing in her vision just as I had 15 years ago. After the show, I left her a note: never let someone else define your worth. True art comes from believing in yourself, even when no one else does. In my studio that night, I looked at my salvaged canvas, the piece that started everything. It still spoke to me of determination, of finding beauty in rejection. But now it also reminded me that sometimes the most valuable things in life are the ones others throw away. I picked up my brush and began to paint, letting the colors flow freely, because in the end, art isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right, one canvas at a time.